Aloha, everyone. Please grab yourself some more stuff to eat, and we'll get started. So welcome, everyone, to the first of Hawaii J20's Solidarity Series. United We Stand with Migrants. Is this mic okay? Is it not too loud? It's okay? Okay. And a special welcome to those who are joining us through the live stream that Malcolm back there has wonderfully donated his time and energy to organizing. I think we've got about 30 or 40 people that are joining us on live stream from the neighbor islands, so that's fantastic.
About 75.
So my name is Nandita Sharma. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I'm also a member of Hawaii J20. Hawaii J20 first came together I guess the day after Trump 1.0 was announced. In 2017, we came together to act on shared concerns about the rhetoric, the actions, and the politics of Donald Trump's agenda. And in 2021, we foolishly closed up shop, thinking that we were done. But we've come back, we've revived ourselves to fight Trump and the billionaires again. And of course now, as all of you know, it's more urgent than ever. We are a nonpartisan organization, and we welcome any of you and more to join us in our collective actions. So today we mark 60 years since hundreds of peaceful protesters were crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, fighting for their civil rights, where they were met by a wall of police. Protesters were tear gassed and beaten. Some of them had their skulls cracked. There was a 14-year-old girl that required 30 stitches on her skull. So like them, we must and we will take to the streets and protest. We will blockade, we will disrupt, we will intervene, we will sit in, we will walk out, we will rise up, and we will make more noise and good trouble than Trump can bear. So please put your name and contact information down on one of the sign-up sheets so that we can stay in touch and let you know what we're doing. And if you want to join us, also, we have a website, hawaiij20.com, no hyphens, just hawaiij20.com. The hyphen one was taken up by an Indonesian porn site, so don't go there. Go to hawaiij20.com and let us know if you want to come to any of our meetings and join in deciding what we're going to do. So before we start today's forum, we'd like to thank everyone who made tonight's gathering possible. So first and foremost, thank you to our friends here at the Church of the Crossroads who gave us this wonderful space to meet. Thank you to our co-sponsors, the wonderful people at Harris United Methodist Church's Sanctuary Ministry team, amazing group of people, and our friends at Indivisible Hawaii. And thank you to all the Hawaii J20 folks whose work has made this possible. If you wouldn't mind standing up and waving your arms and letting people know who you are, so that there's a lot of us. So thank you for all of those works. And of course, thank you to our speakers, who I will introduce shortly, David Day, Liza, Gill, and Brissa, Flores. For making the time to share your knowledge and your experience with us. I'll introduce them shortly. And thank you to Junho Roden, whose work, who will be sharing his experience with us shortly. And also Amy Akbayani, who will also be sharing the stories of two people on Maui with us shortly. Before we start, I also want to thank all of the people whose work in growing, picking, preparing, and serving the food that we are enjoying here today and every day. Thank you to the bus drivers, the taxi drivers, the auto workers, the cleaners, the software engineers, those young women who are assembling our phones and our computers, everyone. We need everyone. And that is something that Donald Trump does not understand, right? His is a political agenda of hate and division, and at its core is a deep disrespect and demonization of those people that nation states call migrants, right? Humans have been moving ever since our species, Homo sapiens, have been on Earth, right? Homo sapiens emerged in East Africa about 200 to 300,000 years ago, and we've been moving ever since. All of us move, right? Our lungs move each time we take a breath. For those of us who can, our legs and arms move so that we can do the things that we must do and that we want to do. And without this movement, we would die, right? So movement is life. So migrants are those people whose freedom of movement is regulated and restricted by nation states. No nation state in the world thinks of itself as a home for everyone, right? Each of them decides to create conditions that allow some people, classified as citizens, rights, and all others, non-citizens, either less or no rights at all, right? This is not natural and it's not inevitable. The US hasn't even had immigration and border controls for the entirety of its 250-year existence. Right? The first Immigration Act of the United States was 100 years after its Declaration of Independence. Right? 1875 was the first immigration control. And it was, it would be considered nothing in comparison to today's. So taking away people's freedom of movement on our planet is a decision, right? One that we can decide against. But what Donald Trump wants is more regulation and more restriction, at least for the poor. For the very, very wealthy, those who can shell out $5 million US dollars, he wants to offer what he calls a gold card so that they can buy their way into the rights that are denied to the poor. Right? And there's been much talk about Donald Trump's plans of mass deportation, and these are real and they're scary. They have frightened a lot of people already, but they're not going to be able to force everyone without the proper papers out of the United States. And that's precisely the point, right? The point isn't necessarily to get all undocumented migrants out of the United States. If there's one lesson that we desperately need to learn to stop Trump's anti-immigrant agenda, it is that what Trump wants is not necessarily that poor people stop coming to the United States through their own free will, or that all those who are here without papers get deported. What Trump wants to ensure is that people are afraid, because being afraid is a necessary step to making people more compliant. Compliant with employers who don't want to pay them a fair wage or who don't want to pay them at all. Compliant with employers who make undocumented farm workers work with carcinogenic pesticides, or undocumented construction workers work under life-threatening conditions. Compliant with landlords who don't fix their plumbing or their stoves or offer them heat. Compliant with abusive partners who rely on their fear of deportation to keep those that they abuse under their thumb. Right? What Trump wants also is for us, those who are not being targeted with mass deportation, to hate and demonize those classified as migrants. Because when we do that, when we hate migrants, we defeat ourselves, right? We weaken ourselves. Whenever there is someone that can be paid less than ourselves, we weaken our negotiating ability with employers. When we are busy hating those with less rights and money than us, we are too busy to look at who's actually taking away our rights and our economic security. Okay? The billionaires and those who are hoarding power. So Trump's attempted actions, taking away the right of birthright citizenship that people won as they defeated the evil institution of slavery in the United States, using a notorious torture site, Guantanamo Bay, to secret away migrants, abrogating the international right for everyone to claim asylum in the United States when they need it, raiding people's workplaces and homes and separating people from their livelihoods and their loved ones, giving billions to private prison owners to cage parents and children. And if we let him get away with any of this, it is just the beginning. Project 2025, a detailed plan to overhaul federal agencies, and which is obviously the blueprint for the Trump agenda, includes more than 175 immigration actions. So we are just seeing the start, including things that we've defeated in the past but are coming back, barring undocumented citizens from, undocumented children from schools. That's back on the agenda. And again, forcibly separating children from their parents at the border. That's part of Project 2025. It's crucial that we stop Trump in his tracks. Fascists everywhere, past and present, use those who can be defined as foreigners, today that's migrants, as a scapegoat. What's a scapegoat? A scapegoat is a person who is blamed for the wrongdoings, mistakes, or faults of others, especially for reasons of expediency. Those whom nation states classify as migrants are not responsible for economic insecurity. Migrants are not responsible for a lack of affordable housing, or employers not paying a living wage, or a university education that's increasingly out of reach for most people. Migrants are scapegoats for those who are responsible for those things, those who would rather turn a profit than protect the sanctity of life on our shared planet. Those who would rather wield power for their own benefit rather than share it with everyone to determine our own lives. So we ignore Trump's anti-migrant agenda at our own peril. We must and we will stand up against his agenda. So the three speakers that we have with us today will outline how we stand united with migrants. We are the same people. We will not allow ourselves to be divided today or anytime. Before I introduce the three speakers at the panel, I have two other people that I would like to ask to speak. The first is Amy Akbayani, who is the Emerita Director for Student Diversity at UH Manoa, and is also a founding member of the Legal Clinic for Immigrant Justice. And she has two stories to share with us from people directly affected by Trump's anti-migrant agenda on Maui.
Hello. Thank you all for coming tonight. I got these...
Is it on?
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, thank you again. I got these two stories that I was asked to share with you tonight on email this morning. They're from Maui. They're both people who are from Mexico. The first person, I'm calling person one, did not want to share her name. The second person definitely wants to share his name. Person one, I'll just read this, and it's just not written by me. I have been on this island for 26 years. Everything that I know is here. My life has really changed with this new administration because I don't have stability or safety. There's no unity in the family because we don't know who they could come for. We're all in shock. It feels like there's no peace. You don't have time to think. You never know when the police can come to your door. There's a lot of nervousness amongst all of us, especially for the older people. This can truly collapse people's lives. It's taking our inner peace away and stripping it from our families. It affects us physically, mentally, and emotionally. The saddest thing about this is that good people turn to bad because there is no stability. It makes it harder to act and live with love, compassion, to keep moving forward. There are kids who are so young they don't even understand that politics, but they're stuck in the middle and they really suffer from all the consequences. There's really no sense of stability in any sense of the word. I'm seeing that Trump signed a law that everyone has to go to the Social Security office to fill out the census. He said that we have to leave voluntarily or they'll come to pick us up. I'm not going to register. I will wait as long as I can. I have rights. They're saying they'll put you in jail for 6 months if you don't fill it out, and that we lose any opportunity for citizenship in the future. And that is just not for non-criminals. He wants to step on the people at the bottom, the most vulnerable, most poor, those without a voice or a vote. Trump needs to look inward and be the example. The Constitution says it protects the human rights of all, and he doesn't respect that at all. But he says that he believes in the Word of God. It's scary and alarming, but we have to hope that God will give us strength. It's really hard right now, and what Trump's saying and how it makes us feel. During the first administration, I remember being discriminated against. That was at the time when I really wanted to learn English, and the teacher was really rude and hurtful. We just wanted to fight for rights that didn't exist. I think the only people who don't understand the impacts of these policies are U.S. citizens who don't have to think about it. I would tell them they're on the wrong path because unity is the best way to move forward, and they are actively working against the unity of humanity. We are walking backwards in time, like when black people had to defend their liberty and their lives. He's working against and breaking everything Martin Luther King Jr. fought for. You need to think about the consequences because of the products and services that won't happen without us. You're teaching the younger generation to hate their neighbors because of where they're from, yet we are all the same. They're not respecting the values of humanity. That's what he's doing, is discrimination. There are so many immigrants from so many countries, Filipino, Honduras, China, Argentina, Nicaragua, and Polynesians. I don't know what the future of immigration looks like because they're showing they'll always see immigrants as less than. Even the kids are bullying. Imagine my daughter, who was born here. What is a racist thing to say to her? Because she's not from here. There's no clean, pure future for them because he's allowing them to bully us in our schools, work, everywhere. He's making immigrants out to be bad people. It's become a powerful word and not in a good way. The second person's name is Cain Villalobos, and he says he wants people to know his story. The most frustrating part about immigration policies is the disregard for your story and everything you've been through. When I was detained on the first day, the immigration officer told me, quote, "You have 3 days to write me a letter on why I should let you pay a fine and let you go and keep your case open." I wrote a letter. I put my whole story in it. I first came to the U.S. when I was 7. I came because my dad is a drug addict and he used to beat us, me, my brothers, and my mom. He drowned us in water. So I ran out of the house. I got some help and I came to the U.S. I started the second grade at Logan Elementary School in downtown LA and made my way all through graduating high school. That's why my English is at the level that it is. I got into and started college, but I didn't finish because it was too expensive. I'm an immigrant who bought a house, bought a car, bought a company. I became my own boss, but they didn't take any of that into consideration. They just don't care about you as a person. I was detained for 9 months at the Federal Detention Center in Honolulu. You're just an immigrant, an illegal, an alien. Those are the words they used to describe me. I was detained by the FBI and the DEA because they thought I was involved in something illegal because my business was so successful. When I was locked up, they asked if I wanted to cooperate. I had nothing to hide. I was honest with them. Even my lawyer told me to tell them the truth. So I told them everything. They asked about my friends, and it had nothing to do with me. At the end, they asked if I had any question. I asked, when can I go home? They responded, you have stuff with immigration. Yeah, I crossed illegally, so why am I talking to you guys? As far as I'm concerned, I have no reason to be in front of a prosecutor from Honolulu and another one from Maui. If my problem is with immigration, they'll let me deal with immigration. The only thing I did wrong was cross the border. This is when I realized that the system was broken. My detention and deportation happened under the first Trump administration. I was picked up from my shop, the business I owned. I was able to show them this letter. It's a petition that has been approved, that they're in the process of getting your papers. The officer told me directly that I had been detained 2 years ago. I would have a fine, but that the Trump administration changed the law. I was technically in the country illegally because he changed that. The petition didn't mean anything anymore. I had no problem with the ICE agents. They were actually really cool. It's just the laws, and they had to follow, and they were doing their job. I saw and heard a lot of stories while I was locked up. There were a lot of people from a lot of places around the world. They said they're treating us badly. We have rights. Yeah, we have rights, but they don't care, and they don't listen to us. If you make a scene, and it's gonna happen is that they put you into the hole for 30 days. The guy read the law and said we shouldn't be detained with criminals. Block 4B is supposed to be for immigrants only, but they had us all mixed, that we were among gang members, rapists, true criminals. There were always fights that broke out, and it got crazy sometimes with gang fights. My entire life has changed. Emotionally, it sucks that I never had a fair chance to live in the US. I feel I accomplished a lot of things. I learned English. I know how to read and write. I can speak properly. I have my high school diploma from Lahainalula College. Lahainalula. College is expensive for people who don't have social security numbers. I love that country. I built a life for myself. I had my own company. I became a contractor. I had employees. I had great things. What else do you want from an immigrant? My wife and daughters are American citizens. What can I do? I don't have a criminal record. I was just trying to do everything right. I lived it. The way the law works is about focusing on whatever wrong you did. In my hearing, the judge told me, the things that you accomplished here in the US, I think you can accomplish again in your own country. It's been 5 years since I've been back in Mexico. I own my own business. I own multiple houses. I'm working and trying to make the best life for myself. But my family is not together. Everything that happened to me in the US, that didn't stop me from growing. I just wish someone could have heard me out. That's all I want for the future of immigration policies in the US, that everyone has someone that hears them out. If they're criminals or have done something bad, I don't have anything to say about that. But if someone has done good, paid their taxes, I paid a lot of taxes, especially as a business owner. I hope that maybe they'll sit down and hear more personal stories. Once you accomplish all those things and they just decide to deport you, it's hard.
Thank you so much, Amy. If I could ask Junho Roden to come up. Junho is a PhD student of in political science at UH Manoa, and he spent the first Trump administration as a student going to school near the San Diego-Tijuana border, and he's going to share his experiences with us.
Thank you. Aloha mai kako. Lovely to see you all this evening. I was 16 when the first Trump administration happened. Before that, I spent a vast majority of my high school, my middle school, my grade school, walking across the US-Mexico border rather normally. It was still militarized. It's been militarized since 2001, but my capacity to cross was not something that stopped me from thinking about life every day. I would go across to eat at my friend's restaurant because their family had a very, very successful Chinese restaurant down in Tijuana. We would cross to go to different people's houses to study. We would cross because we would have some water polo matches down there. We'd cross for concerts, for shows, for life. We were 12, we were 14, we were 15. And this was the way we could be, with our families, with our friends. We lived across that border and we moved across that border and saw our lives across that border. In 2016, the time up to Trump being elected had a lot of people joking about it. We were high schoolers at the time. We didn't think it was serious. We didn't know to think it was serious. A lot of us saw it as something so ridiculous and out of the frame of possibility. We made jokes, we made memes, we discussed it always in the periphery, and we didn't take it as seriously because a lot of our parents didn't tell us to take it seriously either. For a lot of them, they didn't want to imagine that's something that could happen. When he won, I saw the people in my high school drop from 100% attendance, 100% of the people I've seen, to 90, then 80, to only about half of us going back to high school every day. Some people had stopped crossing because they were afraid. Their houses were in Mexico. They were afraid of being stopped. They were afraid of being questioned because one of their families was a citizen and the other wasn't. Some didn't know their statuses. It's not something they ever had to think about, and they couldn't be safe. Some, even if they were citizens, were told not to go because they were afraid what might happen to them and stopped going to high school because of that. People on our side stopped crossing. We were afraid we were going to be put in the crossfire, even the citizens, because people were afraid and sending stories of being afraid again and again and again. I started getting very active because I felt it was necessary. And one of the organizations I worked with was called the Border Angels. They're active in quite a few places, but they're most active in helping people cross the Yuha Desert, away from the San Diego border crossing, getting food and water to make sure that people who are trying to cross in the desert stay alive. Maybe about a few months in, we noticed our food and water was being destroyed. These stations that were out in the Yuha were being tipped over and torn apart. And the first time that we had a camera to check what was happening, lo and behold, it's Border Patrol. Lo and behold, they're telling jokes while they're doing it. And I recognized somebody as one of my high school friends' father, second generation migrant from Mexico City, whose grandparents came here and who had to reinforce the idea that he was here legally because that's the only defense he had to the idea that he deserved to be here. Fear made people hide. Fear made people comply. Fear made people think that they need to find a way to deserve to be here. And each of those people was alone. Each of those people felt afraid and so weren't able to trust the people around them to communicate with them. They were not able to find resources because they retreated because fear makes you feel alone. It makes you follow the policies and practices of being alone. One of the things that I hope that comes out of tonight with us together is we realize how much that fear drives isolation and drives people to places that hurt them, that hurt the people around them, that hurt the generations after them. The most powerful thing we could do, the most powerful thing that I hope I learned, that people can learn, is that the only way together, the only way through this is together. The only way through this is making sure no person feels alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Junha. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our three speakers. And I think just as Cindy's coming up, there's a couple of donation boxes. I'm sorry to have to do this to you, but we are not a funded organization. So if you have any spare change and can put it in the donation boxes, it would be appreciated. And if you don't, we still very much appreciate you, so no worries. So David Day is leading Hawaii Attorney General's efforts in response to Trump's actions, including on immigration, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, on funding freezes, and currently he's litigating 6 cases against the Trump administration, and we are very, very honored to have you here with us. Thank you. And then we also have Liza Gill, who is the executive director of the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights, an organization that, thank God, exists and is doing amazing, amazing work. So thank you very much. And we also have Brissa Flores, who is a DACAmented person here in Hawaii and a graduate of the University of Hawaii that we are very, very proud to have as our alum. So David, would you mind getting us started?
Of course. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? I got you.
Yeah.
So my name is Dave Day. I'm the Special Assistant to the Attorney General. In my capacity right now, I'm working with a team of approximately 10 attorneys, along with the Solicitor General of Hawaii, Kaliko Fernandez, in addressing the various actions of the Trump administration. We've been working together since the election. We've been working with with 23 other Democratic AGs from 22 states in the District of Columbia, in addressing a wide variety of the issues that continue to challenge our nation and threaten the rule of law in this country. This is an important issue to me, speaking about immigration. I'm a son of a Japanese immigrant myself, and understand personally, the importance of immigration to our national fabric. I'd like to begin by kind of speaking about sort of setting up the legal landscape and how this kind of has, this Trump 2, as some people are calling it, or Trump 2.0, has kind of flipped a lot of things on their heads about what we understood about politics in this country. It was not long ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, that the Republican Party was known as the party of states' rights. And by that, I mean it was a small federal government that was intended to have limited powers and only those enumerated by the Constitution. Beyond that, the states were supposed to be sovereign in our federal system of government, and largely exercise what they felt was the correct way of governing themselves. This is not what we are being faced with in today's Trump administration. What we are seeing is, in fact, a system where maximum pressure is being placed upon states to bend to rather arbitrary policy goals, sometimes based on unreasonable time periods, with threats of severe sanctions following against the states if they do not comply. And I'll get into that in just a moment. One of the issues that was raised is the issue of scapegoating. In looking at the executive orders that have been issued by President Trump since his inauguration, there are 4 scapegoats that he are doing. I'm not saying any one is more. There's 2 individuals and then 2 concepts. The 2 individuals are immigrants. Number 1 is immigrants. Number 2 is transgender individuals. Number 3 is the concept of DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion. And number 4 is anything relating to green energy, or the so-called Green New Deal. This all falls within the ambit of what is used in multiple documents as quote-unquote wokeness, is the ultimate enemy, apparently, of the Trump administration. Now, in achieving the way that it's actually trying to achieve its ends through executive orders, and because right now there have been no significant laws. There's Lake and Riley is an immigration law that was passed, but most of the issues that are arising in the immigration space relate to 2 types of documents. They are executive orders and then Department of Justice memoranda. And these documents assert pressure in 4 ways. Number 1 is the most amorphous, and it's the use of terminology and the rhetoric that's used. Specifically, there are multiple executive orders that refer to alien invasions and the repelling of alien invasions. Multiple EOs talk about basically that the nation has been invaded and that the military is needed to counter the invasion. The second is a maximalist policy designed to require federal law enforcement to enforce immigration law, not just against what previously used to be those with deportation orders or with criminal removable offenses, but against basically all removable individuals, which would be, basically anybody who is an illegal immigrant. And this is something that's in the policy, and it's basically people's careers are now kind of on the line about getting behind this policy. The third method for exerting pressure that's being used by the Trump administration today is the threat of loss of federal funding. This is perhaps one of the most significant things that is facing, and the significant challenges that we at the Department of the Attorney General and in states nationwide are facing because of the breadth of the issue. If you recall, in late January, approximately January 27th, there was a memo that went out from the Office of Management and Budget that called for a total funding freeze of all federal funding streams that went to states. The next day, we woke up with Medicaid completely off and shut down. SNAP shut down. Numerous, basically almost every federal funding stream that you could imagine was shut down the next day. And approximately 20% of Hawaii's budget is based upon federal funds. We eventually litigated that case. We have a preliminary injunction in that case. The memo was partially rescinded, but basically the threat remains. And this is relating to multiple issues or multiple executive orders that reference funding threats associated with states that do not comply with immigration-related commands and requests. The number 1 is an executive order that was issued on day 1, entitled Protecting the American People Against Invasion, which called for the Attorney General to strip all federal funds from any state or locality that was a quote-unquote sanctuary jurisdiction. And that is one that interfered with federal law enforcement activities. Number 4, the number 4 method of pressure is threats of investigations and prosecutions against state and local officials who interfere on an individual level. There was a memorandum that was issued on January 21st by the acting Deputy Attorney General named Emil Bove. He was one of Donald Trump's personal attorneys. That said that any state or local official who disobeys a command or request of an immigration official would be subject to investigation and potentially prosecution for obstruction of justice. Just to prove the issue and put a finer point on it is that within the next week or so, there was a sheriff in Ithaca, New York, who I believe, released a detainee that ICE was looking after, and it made it all the way to the top of the Department of Justice, where they were saying that it was right for this person to be investigated and possibly prosecuted. This was just a small-town sheriff that apparently it was based upon the Department of Justice's own mistake. So those are the four mechanisms of pressure that are being exerted that I believe are antithetical to what used to be known as small government in this country. This is, in fact, consistent with probably the broadest view of executive power that we've seen in our lifetime. The only similar issue where these types of conditions have been applied on funding that we could think of, and that is kind of well known, is the issue of driving or selling alcohol to those who are 21 years old. It used to be that you could be 18 years old. Then basically the Department of Transportation said if you want to have transportation funds, then you have to raise your drinking age to 21. Some resisted, but eventually it became the norm. That seems like a relatively small issue compared to basically asking states to perhaps surrender their values, surrender their laws. I'd like to talk quickly, or just if I may, about one executive order that I think was the most I think just that was the most insidious out of all of them. And there were many executive orders that were bad, but I'd like to talk about the birthright executive order, which I believe was a dehumanizing order that really targeted infants. And the title of this, the titles of these executive orders are always very kind of Orwellian in a way. This was protecting the meaning and values of American citizenship. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution was passed after the Civil War. The first words of that say, all persons born in the United States shall be citizens of this nation and the state in which they reside. No qualifications to that. It's normally understood that Republicans, for instance, have a view that you should interpret the text of the Constitution according to the plain words. But in this case, an executive order was issued that basically said that you have to look at the parents to determine whether or not citizenship would attach to a baby who was born in this country. And that it even had a misogynistic element to it, in that the mother could be in the country lawfully under a temporary visa, whether it be a tourist visa or some other temporary visa, but if the father was not a citizen of this country, that baby would still not have citizenship. Numerous courts have struck this down, including with respect to the suit that the state of Hawaii, the Department of the Attorney General, joined. The judge in Washington almost thought that the lawyers who were advancing the arguments should be sanctioned because it was basically such a frivolous position that they were asserting. But I think that this executive order in particular exemplifies the general sense of lawlessness that we have been experiencing within the first approximately 2 months, less than 2 months, unfortunately, less than 2 months of the Trump presidency, and the disregard for what are clear legal directives. I'd like to accentuate a few things that the Department of the Attorney General has done in this space. The first thing is before the before the inauguration, the state of Hawaii intervened in a lawsuit in North Dakota to defend a final rule of the Department of Health and Human Services that would allow DACA recipients to receive Obamacare, essentially health care. This was something that was passed during the Trump administration, or pardon me, the Biden administration, and President Biden had been defending this rule. But then, as with virtually every case that the federal government has been defending since the Trump administration takes over, it switches sides. And so it would basically allow the rule to die. And so the state of Hawaii, along with several like-minded states, have intervened to defend the validity of this rule to ensure that DACA recipients continue to receive health care. In addition, we have filed briefs and amicus briefs in support of those who wish to strike down the executive order regarding asylum. There was an executive order that would have basically required that asylum claims be limited to only certain people, basically those who would be able to, quote, contribute to society, and that would not cause an undue burden on the nation. This is contrary, obviously, to the purpose of asylum, which is not what the person could contribute, but to the hardship that is faced in the home country, including the threat of harm or death. The amicus brief that we filed, we're happy to say, was helpful, and that a preliminary injunction was issued in that case. The Department of the Attorney General notes that unlike some other states, Hawaii has no laws governing how state or law enforcement interact with federal immigration authorities. So there are some states that are sister states that we deal with all the time that have so-called sanctuary jurisdictions. Either they are sanctuary jurisdictions in their entirety and that they prohibit all communication with ICE, or maybe they have cities that would be sanctuary jurisdictions within them. We do not have laws like that on the books. What I can say is that the Department of the Attorney General has no agreements whatsoever with ICE or any federal agency, and it's my understanding that no state law enforcement agency has any such agreements with ICE. I can also state that the Department of the Attorney General has been advising its clients and educating its clients on the meaning of immigration laws, about what it means for something to be a judicial warrant, a judicial subpoena, versus a administrative warrant, an administrative subpoena, and what it means to obey each of those. We've been advising our clients on how to respond in situations where they're confronted with a situation in numerous situations. And so in this respect, the Department of the Attorney General is endeavoring to fill the legal gap that we have today. I'd like to thank the legal clinic, and I'd like to thank everybody, Liza here, who we've been working with and spoken with many times about sort of the best way to go about doing things. It's not always an easy decision. There are many considerations at the Department of the Attorney General that we have to take into account, and we're trying our best in these difficult times. And with that, thank you very much.
Aloha, can you hear me? Okay, great. Aloha, mai kako, Liza, Ryan, Gill. So nice to be with you today. I'm originally from the Salish territories of British Columbia, but Hawaii is my home. And I feel very lucky that when my staff wasn't here early enough to table, that my mother-in-law would jump in, because she was already here. And so it's a blessing to join an ohana that has already been caring and thinking about these things for so many generations. And so mahalo mama. I'm really excited to talk to you today because not only do we have the benefit of getting to work with incredible partners like the Attorney General's office, and I can just attest to the fact that these guys are working around the clock. Like, I cannot believe how many times you have sued. And it is, I feel like I get a press release in my inbox every day, and then I see Dave and I know that he's barely been home and that he probably didn't have lunch, and they are working hard for the people of Hawaii, so we should be really proud of their office and everything that they are doing and the ways that they are standing up and being very thoughtful also in that process process and being so collaborative in reaching out to so many organizations and hearing us and hearing our concerns and walking alongside us. So Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights is a small advocacy organization representing about 30 immigrant serving and led organizations across the Pai'aina. And we predominantly work on federal, state, and local advocacy. And what I want to do briefly tonight is just to do a little level setting on what does our population look like right now, what might they be facing, what have we seen in the past, what are we seeing in these first 6 weeks that have felt like a decade, and then let you know that there are amazing people on the ground that are very tired right now, but they are doing this work. Some of them are in the room. I see Sandy Ma from the legal clinic. I see Sergio from Hawaii Workers Center. I see our hardworking rep Baladi in the back there. People that are concerned and caring and thinking about, and we'll highlight a little bit about how their work fits into everything that is happening. So, here we go. I have lots of slides. So tonight, just to share a little bit, I'm sure many of you know, if you've spent any time here in the state, we are blessed to have about 18% of our population that is foreign born. About half of those individuals originate from the Philippines. We have relatively a small undocumented population, and I just ask you to hold one thing in your mind as we talk through this. Oftentimes folks talk about status, or somebody is illegal or undocumented or unauthorized, or they're legal. It's obviously way more complicated than that, and it's also, there are times when people are in status and out of status, and there might be people that think that they are in status but might actually be out of status, or they have a status and then the president rips it away. And so it is something that is extremely fluid, and so we have to hold that in tension. So of those about 41,000 folks that are considered out of status here in the state, roughly about half of them are from the Philippines. We have another population, approximately 9,000, which we don't consider undocumented, but those are our Kofa brothers and sisters from Micronesia that have a special status and are considered migrants. Now, if they haven't updated a specific piece of paperwork, somebody might consider they are considered under this kind of data set as being undocumented, but they are not undocumented. They are always allowed to live here in the United States because of the terrible things that we have done in their countries. And they have newly, thanks to Senator Hirono and the longtime advocacy of our members of Congress in DC, newly have access to federal benefits that they only just got a couple of months ago. So for those individuals, and then Brissa will talk a little bit later, but we have 340 DACAmented folks and many more that are potentially eligible for DACA within the state. We also have about a little shy of 17,000, so that's about 10% of the state's public school students are English language learners, meaning that they are kids that are blessed to speak a language at home and to learn another language. And those top 5 languages are Ilocano, Chuukese, Marshallese, Tagalog, and Spanish. So when we think about what our immigrant population, our foreign-born population looks like here in Hawaii, that gives you a sense, but 50% from the Philippines, another roughly 8% Japanese, 8% Chinese, slightly less Korean, and then it really breaks out into a plurality of that. So Micronesians, Vietnamese, those from Mexico, Canadians like myself, and folks from Hong Kong. We have a lot of folks that are eligible to naturalize, which if you are an LPR and considering that, please do. Put it at the top of your list as something to pursue. It not only confers on most folks a large pay increase. We see people on average make 10 to 15% more once they become a naturalized citizen, but it's also just one thing that you can do for yourself and for your family for peace of mind. Foreign-born folks are overrepresented in a number of industries, especially in our agriculture. Something that, as we strive in Hawaii for food sovereignty, 40% of our mahiai, of our farmers, are foreign-born. If you saw recently the case of the Chinese political asylum seeker that was recently detained up in Laie, he'd been farming up there for 16 years. His petition for asylum, because he was a political refugee from China, was denied, and he was detained a couple of weeks ago. They are also overrepresented in our tourism and hospitality industries, with a full 70% of our housekeepers being foreign-born. I think these are all things that we kind of know, but it's good to call it out and say these industries that we have in Hawaii, and even industries that we want to grow, like agriculture and growing our own food, they are supported by foreign-born people who do this work. Fully half of our chefs and head cooks are foreign-born. So that's a little bit about what the population looks like here in Hawaii. And when we think about what did it look like under the first Trump administration, what were the actions that actually happened on the ground? During those years, so we'll say from 2015 under the tail end of the Obama administration, which actually had very high levels of deportation, into the first 2 years of the Trump administration, so 2015 to 2018. We had about 1,100 ICE arrests during that time. So that's an average of about 250 to 300 ICE arrests in the state per year. 570 of those individuals that were arrested in that time period are Chinese nationals. So that might, if you remember when we were talking about the demographics, they are not the largest immigrant population, but for some reason, and if you have connections in the Chinese community or have folks that you're worried about, we do have resources in Chinese and are looking to create more resources for the Chinese community, because I think that there is, within our member orgs, we don't have any org that focuses specifically on this population, and we are concerned about them. The second largest group, and if you remember when we talked about COFA folks not being deportable by status, but if they are convicted of a crime, they become deportable. And so the second largest group after Chinese nationals are actually those from the Federated States of Micronesia, and when you combine that with the Marshall Islands in that time period, that was about 125 COFA migrants that were deported. After that, it drops precipitously to Mexicans and Filipinos, Vietnamese, and Tongan, Samoa, South Korea. So there's a real range, but again, our populations look different here in Hawaii than what you see on the TV of things that are happening on the continent. For most folks, when we talk about our unauthorized immigrant population, probably the picture that you should have in your mind is a middle-aged Filipina woman who is working in a care home who has overstayed a visa, who lives in Kalihi or Waipahu. And that is the preponderance of what our undocumented population looks like. So within that population of those who were arrested in those times, and so this kind of goes back to this question of like how we interact with the federal government. What does that look like right now? We always try to listen to our members, and we're actively participating in trying to get folks released to their family and out of detention at this very moment. But we're also trying to look at the data and understand what has this administration done in the past, what are the pathways that they might follow in the future. During that time, we saw of that 1,100 individuals, we saw that 706 of them had no other conviction. So when the Trump administration talks about targeting folks that are criminals, they can say that out of their mouth, but what they will then also say is, we will also take collateral. So say they're going and looking for Liza Ryan Gill, they have a removal order for me, and they come to my house and they see my children are there. They ask my children about their documentation status. They discover that they are also, this is a hypothetical, that they are also not documented, and they take my children with me. So I'm one, but my children are two individuals. So they can say, I was going for Liza, she was the criminal, But they can take all these other folks that their only crime is maybe that they overstayed a visa, which is a civil infraction. And so this is how you can end up with numbers where there are many more folks that are detained that do not have any criminal convictions, and they can stay still, we are targeting these people, but actually we're collecting everybody who might be in that room at that time. That's when they were saying that. I don't even know that they're saying that they're going after criminals right now, because we have a lot of cases where folks are being detained that do have no criminal convictions. They've just missed a court date, and they are being picked up with their children and held in detention. So the other thing to notice, which goes back to some of our policy prescriptions and the ways that we've been working together as a coalition to advance state and local policy, is that when we looked at those arrests, we oftentimes ICE would like to have a collaboration with the local police department there, so that if somebody gets arrested, and when someone is arrested, you know, again, Liza Ryan Gill gets arrested, and they fingerprint me, and my fingerprints go into a database that is shared between all the federal agencies, right? So they know already whether or not we have a signed agreement with ICE to share information, and even in a quote-unquote sanctuary jurisdiction, that information is going to all of these agencies. So they know, and they may get a ping. They're like, well, we have a Liza Ryan Gill that we've been looking for. And then they may call that police department and say, hey, do you have this Liza Ryan Gill? We would like to come and see her. Then oftentimes what they like is to have kind of just easy access into those jails so they can come and go and check on these people. That is typically how they get large amounts of arrests in certain jurisdictions. When we looked at our data here, that has not been historically what is happening in Hawaii. So our largest number of apprehensions were non-custodial arrests. So of those 1,100, 786 were non-custodial, meaning that they were folks that are like out on the street, or maybe they were at their home, or they were in some other location, but they were not being detained by local law enforcement at that point in time. So I think that helped us think about, okay, so if we are gonna try to do the most good for the most people in the state, these numbers help us understand how we need to target our efforts. We also know that our current court backlog is about 1,210 cases. 790 of those are Chinese nationals, and the second largest group are Guatemalans. So with all of that information, what does it look like right now? What we have seen is not necessarily an increase in the number of ICE agents that are on the ground, but they have deputized new agencies that are authorized to do removal. So you may have seen on the news last night an action that happened in Kona, and there were some pictures there, and you could see on a beige flak jacket, it said HSI. HSI is a part of Department of Homeland Security, but it's not one that is normally involved in removal proceedings. But in the conversations that we have had with the special agent in charge at HSI, they have mentioned that whether they like it or not, this is a whole of government approach. And so everybody is getting pulled into this. So that is, DEA, that is HSI, that are other federal agencies that are honestly not trained and don't know immigration law and haven't done this work before. So we may not have seen that many more ICE agents coming to Hawaii, but we do see the federal agencies that are already here now being given new marching orders. Like, you used to try to combat cybercrime and contraband and fireworks, and now you pick up moms and detain children. And so that is something that we are watching, and we're also working with our partners where we have member organizations where we have seen detentions happen, also to always understand whether or not our local police are collaborating on these operations. I will say to this moment in time, we have not seen local police involved in any of these actions. we don't have we're not omniscient. We haven't seen every arrest that has happened, but to the best of our ability, we do not have any confirmation. We've also, along with the legal clinic, have been able to have conversations with the chiefs from Honolulu and from Hawaii County, and our members Roots Reborn on Maui with the chief of police in Maui, and I can report that Honolulu and Maui County, they do not honor those detainer requests. So when we talk about a sanctuary city, so far the federal government has defined a sanctuary jurisdiction extremely narrowly. And that means whether or not, when Liza gets arrested and I'm held at Honolulu jail, when ICE wants to come and check and see if I might be somebody that they want, they send a request. A detainer request. And it is up to the local jurisdiction whether or not they honor that request and hold on to me. Now, they may have said, oh, we made a mistake, you can go now. But then there's a little ping that came up in that system, and I sent a request, I don't know, we're interested in Liza. And so they would ask the local police department, could you hold her up to 48 hours? There's just like a little problem with that. I haven't been convicted of anything, and there's not another arrest. And so I'm being held unlawfully in violation of my Fourth Amendment rights. So when they say you're breaking federal law and not cooperating, what actually is happening is saying, actually, we don't have a responsibility to do that. And also, you're asking us to break federal law to do that for you. And so not only is it like, it's not good for public trust in our local police to do that, but it actively could open those police, that municipality to litigation for breaking somebody's civil rights. And so I think, I was very proud. I made my mother-in-law watch like 3 hours of the hearing, the congressional hearing with the mayors, and very proud to have been in Boston and got to vote for Michelle Wu. And I watched them try to explain that to these Congress people who are not immigration attorneys, and most of them have never been a police officer, and they're like, we are following federal law. What you're asking for us to do is to break the law. And so I think that has been an issue, but nonetheless, the federal government has decided to pick on that one little thing, right? And in a sanctuary city or in a sanctuary state, it doesn't mean that ICE can't operate. They can still detain and deport people. I think it's one reason why the sanctuary NOMR is not very good, because there actually is no safe place. And we don't want to give people false hope. But at the same time, we have been very concerned to say we want anybody experiencing intimate partner violence to know that they can call the police, and that the police are going to be there for them and not going to turn around and go, do you have a passport? Where are you from? Because then we know women are not going to report crime. They're not going to report assaults. Fires are not going to get reported. Abuse is not going to get reported, because people don't know if the police are there to handle community safety or they're there to do the job of the federal government. And again, nothing is stopping the feds from doing their job. They just have to do it. And they can't ask other people to do it for them, because that's their job. So with all of that being said, I'm proud to say that our police are responding. They've been responsive. They're taking community meetings. They want to understand how they can maintain community trust. And in all of this process, and here we are, we just had crossover at the legislature. We had a number of bills that we kind of threw out there. We had the beginning of the session and the beginning of the Trump administration at the same time, and we got all the executive orders, and we're like, how do we respond? How can we move faster and smarter than them? So we had a bunch of things that were put forward. Some of them are a little bit dicey because of that fear of reprisal, and other things we've just figured out that we don't need them. because our chief said that they don't do this, and then when we looked at the data, like especially for last year, we saw that there had only been 2 ICE detainer requests in the whole state. And so we're like, okay, this is not really an issue. We got to focus our energy someplace else. We do have 2 bills. One has a hearing on Wednesday. Would always appreciate anybody who wants to submit testimony at 10 a.m. in the Committee of Economic Development and Technology, and that is SB 816. SB 816. And that is called Relating to Due Process. And that, I think, will make a significant impact in Hawaii, because as many of you remember when we were seeing children in cages, you are not entitled to an attorney to be provided to you when you are in immigration court. You are allowed to have one, but if you cannot afford one will not be given to you. And so what we then see are folks for whom English is not their first or second or third language, standing in front of an ICE judge having to plead their case on their own. What this bill would do would to be put very needed money into organizations like the Legal Clinic, like University of Hawaii's Immigration or Refugee and Immigration Law Clinic, Pacific Gateway Center, for them to be able to represent folks who are in deportation removals, to make sure that justice actually happens. Because a child who doesn't understand immigration law, who doesn't speak English, standing in front of an ICE judge to plead their case is not justice. We know what that outcome is. And so please support that bill. We also have another bill, HB 1349, that crossed over relating to the expansion of Medicaid. Obviously, Medicaid, tough moment for Medicaid. So we're watching what happens at the federal level. But what we saw during the first Trump administration was that underweight and preterm babies in populations for whom, Black and brown populations, immigrant populations. And we want to make sure that moms that are having babies in the state of Hawaii have access to prenatal and postpartum care, regardless of their status, so that when these babies are born, they have every shot at having as a healthy and safe life as every other child that's born in this state. So that's basically what we've got going on right now. There's so many other things that are happening, but I will say our movement is strong, so much stronger than we were 5-6 years ago. We have learned a lot from the first Trump administration. I will say they understand our playbook a little bit, and they are doing their darndest to make us fearful, to cut off our money, to make us shut up, and that is scary. And so we're having to figure out new ways and more clever ways to do our work, and sometimes to do our work very, very quietly, so that we don't put the folks that we're representing or the folks that we're trying to help in danger, and also so that our staff members do not get targeted. So if you're not hearing a lot, it doesn't mean that a lot is not happening. It might just mean that it's unsafe for it to be said at this point in time. But please connect with any of us that are here, or there's so many advocates that are in our room. They will tell you the iceberg of work that is happening under the water right now to make Hawaii the state that shows aloha to every single person who has chosen to put their work and their love and aloha into this place. Mahalo.
Now we have Brissa Flores.
Thank you, Dave and Liza, for that great information. Wait, Good evening, everyone. My name is Brissa Flores, and today I'd just like to share a little bit about my story and maybe my journey as a student. And so I'll start by saying that I'm a proud product of the UH system here in Hawaii. I started in KCC, which I love that school, and then I transferred over to UH Manoa to do my bachelor's degree. And then most recently, I graduated from the Richardson School of Law. And so I'll be studying for the bar. I'll be studying for the bar, so wish me luck. So I did all this while being an undocumented/DACAmented student. And so just really quickly, I wanted to ask everybody here, just with a show of hands, who here knows what DACA is? Wow, that's a really good number, actually. I'm actually very surprised. But I do just want to provide a brief overview of what DACA is. So DACA was enacted in 2012 under the Obama administration. It was enacted thanks to the zealous advocacy of allies and the immigrant community itself. And I want to mention that the immigrant community was very involved. It's important to recognize the self-determination that was involved in creating and enacting DACA. I don't want to give all the credit to Obama. But so what this program did was provide relief for individuals who were brought to the United States as children. And that's actually my situation. I was actually born in Mexico, and I was brought over when I was 5 years old, and I had been living in the United States basically my whole life. And so what DACA essentially grants me is a mere 2-year deferral or protection from deportation and 2 years to work. And so in order to continue having this status, I actually have to pay $600, around $600 every 2 years. If I don't pay that money, then I will be susceptible to deportation. I won't be able to work. And so $600 is a lot of money to spend, especially when you're a student. You know, it takes a huge financial toll, especially when you're having to worry about tuition, because that in itself is a whole nother issue for undocumented students. We don't have access to federal aid at all, and even scholarships are hard for us to obtain because some of you may not know that scholarships also have citizenship requirements, so I was barred from even receiving some scholarships. And so actually, it was also really difficult for me to just obtain loans, because even loans require you to have citizenship. And so it was just a huge financial burden for me during school. And so sorry, let me look at my notes. So yeah, it just feels like I have to live my life just 2 years at a time. It's a very volatile status to live in because I never know. So my DACA card has like a 2-year period that it's valid for, and I never know what the political climate is going to be like at the end of that 2-year mark. I never know what my living situation will be like, what my financial situation will be like. So it's a very stressful situation, just to say the least. And in addition to that, the program is also always being attacked. So actually, in fact, during the first Trump administration, they were partially successful in rescinding the program. So basically, what this meant for people like us that were already DACA recipients was that we were able to continue renewing our DACA, but then there were folks who were DACA eligible who were already in the process of applying for DACA, or they were obtaining money to apply for DACA, and they are now just left completely unprotected. And so we actually have a lot of those students. We have some of those students at UH, and they always come to me with questions, you know, how do I get a job? Because they don't have a Social Security. And so they're really worried as well about this new administration, because one of the concerns I've heard is that they're afraid that the administration won't know, or the staff won't know the difference between an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. And so for us, it's really important for the school to really reaffirm their commitment to undocumented students. I've checked the website, and I think the last time they've made any sort of announcement addressing undocumented students was in 2016. I think we need the school to reaffirm their commitment to protecting students, especially in this time, because we're at risk now more than ever. And so in addition to that, we also would like to ask the school to just put some action behind, those words. And for one, it would be ideal for us if the school could train the staff, and for example, security guards or the receptionists or front desk people that'll be the first people to see ICE if they were to come on campus. We want them to know the difference between an administrative and judicial warrant, because the layperson wouldn't know the difference. And so with an administrative warrant, you don't have to comply. You can refuse them entering campus. But with the judicial warrant, maybe you have to reply. But we want staff to be trained on that and to know the difference in order to protect the community. Because what we're seeing now is that students are wondering if they're going to have to if they can go to school, or if they're going to have to choose to stay home in order to, just protect themselves and their livelihood. And so, yeah, with that, I'm just going to wrap up quickly and just say that I do feel a bit vulnerable, kind of just, speaking about myself and essentially just outing myself, as an undocumented person. But I do it gladly, one, because Liza asked me, and two, because I think it's important to put a face behind what an undocumented person is. For a lot of people, I feel like the word undocumented is a scary word to them, but I think I need people to realize that we're just regular people. We could be your classmates, we could be your neighbors, we're, your uncles, aunties. And so we also just have, the same complicated lives you have. We also just have a purpose just like you. And so I just want to thank you all for being here and for taking in this important information. I hope that you can be allies, because what I've seen in our community is that we feel almost invisible, like was mentioned earlier, because we feel like if we were to ask for help or to maybe out ourselves, we're going to put ourselves at risk and our livelihoods at risk, or the livelihoods of our family at risk. So we need you guys to step up and help us fight the good fight for the next 4 years. So thank you for being here.
Thank you to these three really helpful talks. I remember when Trump's election was first announced, the sense of deflation, the sense of shock and fear, and what on earth are we going to do? And so listening to the three of you allows all of us to understand that there is a lot being done. There are a lot of people who are opposing and resisting and defending people in our communities. And so I think just that fact gives us the strength to continue. And I think the most important thing is to not be divided, right? Division is the tool that's going to defeat us. So being united is more important than ever. And in that, before we open it up for your questions and comments, I just wanted to announce our next installment of J20's Solidarity Series. The next topic is going to be United We Stand with Those Targeted by the DOGE, the so-called fake Department of Government Efficiency. David Day has graciously offered to speak at that forum as well, because you're at the forefront of defending people in Hawaii against those actions. And Professor Manfred Steger, who is in the audience from the sociology department, will be speaking about the ideologies behind efforts to freeze federal funding, to destroy social services, and more. So please come to that. It will be on Friday, April the 11th, from 6 to 8. And this time our friends at Harris United Methodist Church are going to be hosting us. So please put that on your calendar. And if you've signed up, you'll get notices for that event. I also, just before I open it up, wanted to let you know that Hawaii J20, along with our friends at Indivisible Hawaii, have printed and organized a Know Your Rights campaign. So these stickers are available at the sign-in desk, and there's a big QR code as well at the entrance door that you can scan and get your own copies of these Know Your Rights cards. And it's basically available in English as well as the major languages for people who are being targeted by ICE and other federal agencies. So please pick one of these up. And if you are anywhere where people need this information, hospitals, housing complexes, work sites, the bus, anywhere, schools, where people need this information, please pick it up, stick it up somewhere, pass along the information. Hawaii J20 is also involved in the Tesla protests. There's a flyer at the front desk as well. So every Wednesday and Friday, we are in front of the Waikiki Tesla shop between 5 and 6. So please join us to demand that Elon Musk be fired. And last but not least, we have informational tables. I'm sure many of you have already availed yourself of the important information that our friends from the Legal Clinic, from the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights, and from our wonderful allies and friends at the ACLU Hawaii have another important source of defense for people in Hawaii. So please pick up information, get involved with them, get involved with us. And now Maddie, who is a PhD student in the sociology department here at UH, not here, over there at UH Manoa, is going to be roving with a microphone. So if you have any questions or comments, please raise your hands and she'll get to you.
Hello. Oh, okay. There we go. Does anyone have questions? Yes. Yes, next. Yes, definitely.
I think most of us here are totally against what Trump is doing. But some background I'd like you to make us aware of is how did Obama indeed deserve the deporter-in-chief label? And what was happening during that period of time? How many immigrant groups were actually protesting what he was doing, if it was that bad? It sounds bad.
I wasn't doing that work during Obama's administration, but so yeah, absolutely. So the question was related to, so in many immigrant rights organizations, Obama is referred to as the deporter-in-chief. Obama did in fact deport a lot of people, and Trump didn't even get close to his numbers. And I think that was in a conception of trying to make a deal with Congress to say we'll harden our border and we will try to, we will deport a number of people and you will give us comprehensive immigration reform. And that deal never worked out. And so I think a lot of people got deported and we still do not have comprehensive immigration reform. So, and to say lots of immigrant organizations were fighting Obama tooth and nail through that whole period of time. You talk to our friends in Chicago and they still won't let that shit go. So.
I think it's also important to note that immigration controls are actually a structural characteristic of nation states, right? I think that that's a much larger discussion that we need to have, and that we really need to consider whether we want to continue to organize our world as a world of nation states in which people can be legally discriminated against on the basis of their status, whether they're citizens or migrants. I think that that world has not been in place for very long. It does not need to stay in place, right? So that is also a political choice, and I'm part of social movements that have been fighting against borders for decades, including during the Obama administration. So I think that, you know, that's also an option for us to put on the political table.
Thank you. This has been interesting. I appreciate you all bringing this information out. But one of the things that I've sat back and watched the last, what you say, not even 2 months yet? Yeah. Okay, I'm Black. So I've been involved in watching from the last 72 years because my parents did it. So what he has done has changed things where people that don't look like me are concerned. That's important because I've always felt like we have been in this by ourselves. The thing that I really thought was interesting, the fact that the information they were putting out about deporting people, and you say Obama deported more than anyone else, Trump has been using, no, I can't say, it is Trump, his people have been using information from Obama's term in our time deporting people recently in the last less than 2 months, and that's what they've been reporting on. So consequently, I feel like not only do we have to watch what's coming at you, which creates fear, which is what they did with the Jews. They created fear, and the neighbors became scared, and nobody wanted to say anything. Now, I bring that up because young man was talking about being isolated. I'm the only one in the room on it. Okay? Now, who really feels isolated? I ask folks, you know, and I'm sorry about that, but the deal is we have to work together. I was a legislator for 28 years in Georgia. We all, Republican, Democrat, and everybody else, if you believe in humanity, you have to work together. It's nothing to play with. That's why I say I appreciate you, because I know the long haul you have in front of you. And sweetie, I'll pray for you. And that they continue, because this is not, you don't get paid for this. There's not enough money anywhere for what you're going through. Now, the thing that I just want to ask this one question. What did the Senator Case that voted against the black man in Congress to censor him, and we couldn't get green censored? Something is wrong, and this is Hawaii. Now, I came here to rest, but apparently I'm not going to get much rest, okay? So what, I don't know what he thought he was going to get out of it, but you will see. And the other thing is, I've been in a lot of fights, and you need to go to school, but you have not played or seen a play with this type of people in operation. I wouldn't take a gun to a dog fight, and at this particular time, I probably wouldn't take an attorney, because this is real serious stuff. So you can handle the stuff in the courts, but somebody's got to do something out here on the streets. I'm from the civil rights movement. Okay? And it's not time to play games, because this baby needs to complete her projects, the things that she wants to do. And you understand what I'm saying, right? So because I have gone across that border many a time, never thought about any of the consequences. But then when the help don't come to work, people call me and go, hey. So it's real, it's for real all over. But I appreciate you educating people. Just keep on keeping on. Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for being here. I'm tired, you guys. There's so much going on, and it's just so hard to know what to do. So I came here to learn about immigration. I have friends who are immigrants. My husband is black. My daughter's a 17-year-old trans kid, and it's really scary right now. So you mentioned, David, that the two scapegoats are trans people and immigrants. So we got to protect our own mental health. We got to figure out where we can do the most good and where we can go. Are there efforts for maybe those two groups to fight together? Like she was saying, it's too many splintered groups. We can't do it all separate. We got to all show up for each other.
Sure. So what you're talking about is political organization, and so I think that would be, I'd be very interested in knowing the answer to that. I can say that on the legal side, that these are both issues that the Department of the Attorney General and other blue states with blue AGs are looking into. There have been major victories on the transgender front to date, including in Washington. There was a preliminary injunction that was issued against a ban on gender-affirming care. There have been lawsuits against the military ban on transgender individuals. That's something that the state of Hawaii has joined in an amicus brief on. And so, and we understand, that there is that connection that we spoke about in terms of that these are basically small groups that are being blamed for the problems of the nation, and that's unsettling. So when it comes to political activism, that goes beyond what we do at the Department of the Attorney General. When the Department of the Attorney General, what we do is we go to court and we try to fight and we try to win. So thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. Okay, somebody took my first comment that Obama was the deployer-in-chief, but never mind that, that's past. We cannot do anything about it. But first of all, in 2 years, there is an election. And although Trump doesn't run anymore unless he wants to be a king, and he probably will succeed, we got to do something. We got 2 years to organize. It's true that most of our representatives are Democrats, but still. Now, I got something that my partner made for her political science department. This is a business card with all our representatives' phone numbers and contact address. And what we would like you to do is get one of those cards, and whenever our representative talk for us in Congress or wherever they are, we should call them up and encourage them and to know that they are supported. So yes, we got some more of those over here if you want to stop by. Oh, somebody already distributed them? So great. Have a good one. And we got to fight. We got to be together. What do they say? Divide and conquer? And Trump don't care. And he didn't get there by himself. He has supporters. And I don't mind split this country. I don't want to see Trump ever again. And I don't care for his supporter too much. Thank you.
I have two practical questions, and one is, can you explain the difference so that we all are clear about between administrative and judicial warrants and what their purpose? I mean, I understand one is okay to disobey, the other one isn't, but if you can talk about it a little bit more. And then my second question is, I've had some of the red cards, which I've sort of surreptitiously given to people, and I wonder if you can talk about that and the best way to do that so that we are not disruptive to the people we're giving, you know, we don't, the best way to do it, basically.
Liza, would you be able to answer this question? So one of the things, the limitations we have at the Department of the Attorney General is we have a limitation on being able to give legal advice. Liza, I believe, is just as competent as me on this. I'll let her.
Yeah. So an administrative warrant is just not a warrant. That's what it's called. But oftentimes it's a piece of paper that is signed by oftentimes another agent or but maybe a higher up person at ICE. And that is what it'll say an administrative warrant, but you'll see that it'll come directly from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that a judge has not signed it, and it's oftentimes not very specific. Now so when you get an administrative warrant, again, it's like those detainer requests, right? Like this is we would like you to do this. So we had a case recently, the ERO, which is like the internal removal operations of ICE, and Homeland Security investigations were looking for some individuals on Hawaii Island. They came to the property with administrative warrants, and the advocates that were there and community members were like, let me see your judicial warrant. They were not able to produce a judicial warrant, and they left the property without detaining anyone. Unfortunately, good and bad, they stood up and they pressed them to go and do the whole job that they have to do, and so to the best of our knowledge, then those agents did go to a judge and get a judicial warrant, and the judicial warrant will be signed by a judge, and it will have a recent time, like a window for when they're supposed to be coming to it, and it should have a location. So if the judicial warrant says that it is for St. Andrews, and they come to see you at Church of the Crossroads, that ain't you. They're looking for somebody at St. Andrews. And if it says that it was for 2022, that ain't 2025. That's not for you. And it also needs to be signed. And so the problem is, it takes a lot to get a judicial warrant, and it's a little bit cumbersome, and it takes some extra time and everything. So if they can get you to open the door and go with them by just showing an administrative warrant, something that they can just get their boss to sign off on right there, then that's a whole heck of a lot easier. And so I think that that has been, when people know that and can assert their knowledge and their authority in that knowledge, they know that they have to back down. But that power differential, I tell you, gives me chicken skin to watch some of our sisters and fellow advocates standing up to 8 agents and saying, I don't care that you came here with guns and a badge, show me your warrant. And I was like, that's some serious balls. Like, wow. So yes. So a nod. It didn't screw it up. Okay. Thanks, Dave. And then on how to get folks red cards, I think the main thing is, and you may have seen that clip about what the borders are. Tom Holman talking about how it was like, man, he went to Chicago, thought it was going to be so easy, and then these people, like, they know their rights or something, and you're like, that's because we have great organizations in Chicago that have been doing that grassroots work, that have been educating folks, and those red cards are a big part of that, making sure that folks know that they don't have a responsibility, they can remain silent, that they can show the agent that card. And I think really, really important, and something that we've had to walk through in the last 24 hours, if you are vulnerable, if you have a removal order, know who you're going to call, and know that you have the right to call your attorney. Even though they're not going to give you one, you still have the right to call yours. And we have many amazing organizations here that will follow up and take that call, the Legal Clinic, Pacific Gateway Center, Roots Were Born on Maui. So we want to make sure that people don't get stuck in detention, not knowing what is happening to them, not knowing that they can call their attorney, and not knowing that these agents should explain these rights in a language that they can understand.
Yeah, and just towards that, I wanted to let everyone know that we had a great victory the other day, yesterday, which is that on the Big Island, every bus on the Big Island now will have one of those red cards, one of those stickers on it. So let's make that happen on Oahu, on Maui, on Kauai, etc.
Thank you. I'm pardon me, I'm really curious, what are some specific things we can do now to support migrants on an individual basis or a small community basis? I mean, I really don't know what to do, but I don't think I can wait 2 years for the next election and hope that there's going to be an election. So I'm really concerned about doing something concrete now.
So there's a number of different things that you could do depending on the community that you're in. Like if you know that there's a certain population that might be vulnerable around you, typically there's a church that is in that works with that community. Even talking with that pastor and saying, hey, are there any needs for families that you have here? We just got a request again on Big Island for some families who needed blankets because they were sleeping in their cars because they were afraid to go home. That they needed some food deliveries because they were afraid to go to the grocery store. So we had amazing women on Hawaii Island that are going to organize that and make sure that food gets to them, that those kids get blankets. But so that's one that takes a little bit of legwork on that. If you are close to a school or in an institution like the University of Hawaii, or you work at a hospital or a healthcare center, talking to your administration about what you're doing to make sure that everybody feels welcome in that space, and delineating what is a public and private space. So Immigration's Customs Enforcement is allowed to go any place that is public. So if we're talking about Queens Punch Bowl, going into the Queens emergency lobby right there, they could go there, which would be really scary for patients and really deter people from getting access to healthcare. So, you could be like, hey, I know CEO of Queens, I don't, but, or I know somebody there, like, what are you guys doing? Are you guys gonna put up some signs and let people, are you gonna send out a letter to your patient population and say, in multiple languages, saying like, we are gonna do what we can to protect you in this space and delineate what is a private space? And then are you gonna train your staff to know the difference between an administrative and judicial warrant? So think about those institutions that are close to you. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say that, you know, many organizations are losing their federal funding, and they are trying to continue to provide the support that they need to for these populations, and seeing them in court. And so the legal clinic, any one of our member organizations ourselves would definitely be jealous for any of your support, so that we can continue to scale up and do these Know Your Rights trainings in those communities. But also, again, if you're close to a population there and you want to help organize a Know Your Rights training, get a hold of any of us. We'd be happy to come to your community.
Aloha. First of all, I want to thank our panelists, and I really appreciate David's question about not answering what you can do on the political side. So my name is Della Albalati. I'm a state representative. Rosemary, thank you for your question. I think I cannot say enough about Liza and what Legal Clinic is doing. I think one of the things that you can do that's really important right now is speak to your legislators locally. Go to your capital and support some of the bills that Liza talked about, but also stay engaged, because we are already having discussions at the state legislature about things that are going to happen this year. There may be special sessions. We're going to have to respond to what's happening at the federal government. We're going to know what the federal budget is going to look like on March 14th in September. So we are actively looking at ways to respond to that one threat that David talked about, which was the threat of the loss of federal funding. One thing that the state legislature can do is look at revenue generation, and let's tax the rich. Let's tax the people who are getting tax relief. If they're gonna get tax relief because they're gonna extend federal tax cuts for the rich, because they wanna cut Medicaid, then we need to look at tax revenue generation that's going to make sure we can pay for the social services like the Medicaid. So really, when you ask about what can you do for activism and what can you do now, please stay engaged with your local legislature. We are going to be there through May. We are dealing with revenue generation bills with the budget. And we don't have all the answers yet, but we have the tools. We in Hawaii are not going to be able to fill the 20% that we're going to lose from the federal government, but we got to figure out some ways that we can start to restore it, and we can. There is hope. We have great people like David fighting in the courts, but that's not going to be enough. We're going to have to come back with policy propositions, policy proposals. We're going to have to come back with revenue proposals, and that really is going to take all of you. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping in on this, but you guys are doing fantastic work to answer the questions of what we can do now for the next 2 years. We need you to stay engaged at the national level, but we also need you to stay engaged at the local level, because you got to get people like me to talk about how we're going to fund the services we need. Thank you, and that's the only comment I have.
How many more questions are we allotted, Nandita?
We have maybe 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes?
So
Okay. Yes, anyone?
Yep, depends.
One comment, and it won't be effective for everybody, but something that we could begin to consider. Unlike many universities, the University of Hawaii's Immigration Student Services and Faculty and Immigration Services don't have a legal expert in terms of an actual immigration lawyer assisting them, meaning that our students, our faculty, our staff, the many people that come here to study and to engage here, the people calling themselves immigration specialists aren't immigration lawyers. They aren't able to provide actual legal advice that is supported by legal aid. And some of the sentiments that they've expressed very recently has been, with a little caveat, this is not legal advice, leave the country immediately, to people who are here legally. And that's what they've been sending people, and proliferating, once again, that fear on things that are not founded in reality. what are the steps, if any, to begin to combat that? The space in which legal immigration experts are not actual immigration lawyers. Because I'm not sure if it's just the university, if this is affecting UH Manoa, if it's affecting the community colleges as well, if it's affecting the other campuses. That's a lot of people who are being given messages that are just fear.
I'd call Esther. And so if you haven't talked to Esther Yu yet, then that is something definitely to bring up. And I'm sure that Bree would be happy to connect you guys on that front as well and think about maybe it is one thing that you could do is we could try to get a Department of Justice accredited rep that could actually perform some immigration law like they don't have the full rights of an immigration attorney. They can't do everything an immigration attorney do, but if it has to do with a budget thing and not being able to pay for a full-time attorney to be there, then a DOJ accredited rep is a good option for the University of Hawaii. And that DOJ accredited rep, I don't know why you would also not just send people to like the Refugee and Immigrant Law Clinic at UH and be like, yeah, so that's an interesting problem, but I feel that's solvable.
Yeah, I was talking to folks from the law clinic, and they said ISS has not contacted them at all. And it's just very disappointing to see that disconnect, but thank you.
It's time to be annoying. Just be annoying. Just be very, very annoying.
In terms of what we could do there's a bunch of us here that have some connection to UH Manoa. The new president of the UH system is having a public forum on Thursday, March the 13th, 3 p.m. At the UH Manoa Campus Center Ballroom. This is a place to talk to her directly and tell her what we want.
One more.
Last question?
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Capitol. Women's March tomorrow at 11 at the Capitol. Wear your pussy hats. And I've written endlessly to Case, and I encourage everybody to write to him. He needs to know he's not representing us.
Okay. Thank you so much, Maddie, for your help. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This was such an amazing turnout. We're so happy to see you here because seeing you here makes all of us stronger, right? And it makes all of us in this room stronger. We cannot be defeated because if we are defeated in this fight against Trump, this is a multi-generational defeat. We have got to stand up for the future of our planet, for the future of our children and grandchildren to come. We must stand up for each other. We cannot be divided. And it's so wonderful to see people not accepting that we have nothing to do with migrants, that we are together. So thank you very much. I'll see you hopefully at the next forum, April 11th at Harris Methodist Church. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very fun.